Welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and it is such a treat to be here today. For the second time round, we've got David O'Brien. David, how are you, brother?
Hey, Amrit, how are you? Yeah, it's great to be back again. I really enjoyed the last time, so yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat and hopefully parting on some good information to your listeners. Yeah.
That is so humble of you. I have to say, the last episode is one that I've listened to many times over, and I just want to reiterate to everybody as well, it's probably going to be an episode that you want to listen to a couple of times. Even the last episode, like at different parts of my health journey over the past year, I've listened back to the episode and I've picked up different things throughout listening to it, certain aspects of gut health, certain aspects of, the neurochemistry that I have, and, what are the factors that all play in together to my health and well-being. And I think the biggest takeaway for me over and over again, every time I listened to it, was that classical reminder about monotherapy being complete bullshit. So I really respect the space you hold in that. So for those listening in, there is another episode with David that you'll please do check out. And I think for those listening in for the first time, Dave basically is the founder of Fifth Element Wellness.
That co-founder.
Yep. Yeah. Of Fifth Element Wellness, and it comes from a background in, I guess, basically strength training, but that is such a small, light in the prism of really what he does. It's even holistic wellness is, this is as holistic as it gets, in my humble opinion, and it's way beyond wellness. It's health and life. It's everything. So it's been a real treat to have had you on the podcast, especially a lot of people that have come to me looking for advice in and around this space. It's been really a useful tool to refer them to you, but also listening into the episode. Just every time I refer someone to the episodes, it's an impetus for me to sort of check in, and I just keep reiterating how much value I got in that episode. So thanks for being here today, bro.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And as I said, like maybe there might be some new things that people pick up on. I mean, yeah, I think you touched on some really valid points for me. So we are called Fifth Element Wellness, and we sort of are based on like 5 fundamental aspects that we believe is the key to optimal health and getting the most out of your body. And aspects like strength. Yeah, okay. Like, if I touch on that really quickly, because I don't want to go too much down the training realms, but imagine if I've got like a muscle fiber here. Okay. And the key fundamental, like strength is like the seed. So you want to plant the seed so you can build all the, just watch it grow and let all the other fundamental things build around it. Yeah. Okay. And the whole thing, if I've got that muscle fiber, the key thing that I want to develop first is like mass and strength. Okay. So that's strength. Yeah. Okay. So once I've developed mass and strength in that muscle fiber, now within that fiber, I can recruit more motor unit pools within that muscle fiber. And so that might be aspects like speed and power and explosiveness and all these types of things. Unfortunately, what we've got now is like people want to skip steps. So they don't want to develop mass and strength in the fiber. They just want to go maybe do something like F45, where it's straight to shock training and plyometrics and all these, because it's quick and easy. But guess what? Like, you need to develop that. You need to plant the seed first.
You need your foundations.
So you can actually recruit the fibers, so you can actually recruit the motor unit pools, so you can actually perform those movements under a safer realms. Yeah.
So does stretching fit into one of those motor unit pools, or is stretching...
sorry, repeat that, Amrit.
Is stretching falling into one of those motor unit pools, or is stretching slightly different?
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole thing is, if I'm just like abiding by stretching and like, because we're talking about aspects within that stretching, like flexibility and mobility. And once again, that depends on the individual. A lot of people tend to focus on getting more, elasticity through the muscles and so on. And I'm not saying people don't have that problem, but most people really struggle more with mobility. Yeah. And so that might be something like lubrication of the joints, whether that's things like hyaluronic acid and synovial fluid and all these types of things. And that's not just down to movement. That's not just down to doing the right movement patterns. It's also a case that they most likely don't have the building blocks that they actually require for good synovial fluid and hyaluronic acid production, because once again, movement's great. Yeah, okay. But if you don't have the building blocks allowing you to get better lubrication and so forth, well, that's going to be a fundamental issue as well. So I think, it just depends on the individual. A lot of people just put too much focus on flexibility alone. Yep. I tend to find people it's just a bit of a combination. Yeah, they're not very mobile, but they're also not very strong. Yeah, okay. And they're not very strong under movement. Yeah, okay. And that's the thing, like most of the time we're sort of moving in these linear patterns all the time. Yeah, where you look at the human body and we're actually built for complexity. You look at the spine, which is the hub of the central nervous system. Well, you look at the facet joints, they sort of sit on top of each other, especially in areas like the thoracic and the cervical spine, which means they're really built for articulation. And once we start getting more articulation through there, we're getting better blood flow. That helps with things like white blood cell production. That actually helps with, in particular, red blood cells, because you've got a lot of vertebrae there. So you're producing a lot of things like red marrow, yellow marrow. And so that helps with things like platelets and their transporters. So, yeah, I tend to find a lot of the time it's just we're not moving to complexity. And that can, because that's the hub of the central nervous system, that also helps with stimulation of the brain as well. And it helps with areas like the base of the brain, like the locus coeruleus, or the blue spot, and that actually helps with what we call like norepinephrine production, and that helps with focus and concentration. I guess my point is, you can see the body just works in this like beautiful synergy, and a lot of the time we've just tried to isolate a particular pathway or a cell, and I'm not, I think that's amazing science, and I really admire it and so forth. But look at it, but then pull back from it, and then look at the big picture, because if you're just trying to, manipulate pathways and all these types of things, well, yeah, it might fix that pathway, but then maybe it puts, something out in the chain. Do you know what I mean? So we also look at, movement and mobility. They're really important for us. And then, look at aspects like detoxification. And, that doesn't need to be too complex, but more for me, detoxification, a little bit of the unknown with detox is that detoxification starts in the gut and it finishes in the gut. So the reality is, like, we've been putting all this emphasis on the liver, and the liver is really the middleman. And I'm not too worried about the liver because
it regenerates super well.
Yeah, it regenerates amazingly well. And everyone's going to do lemon detoxes and this cleanse and that cleanse and all this focus on like overloading the liver. And I'm just saying, well, don't worry about the liver, okay? Because most of the time, the liver's sort of like enzymes and all these types of things might be out that actually help with detoxification, because the problem is upstream. Yeah, okay. And you look at things like there's all these different cells that line the gastrointestinal tract, and one of the sort of major cells, like mucosal cells, where we actually help to sort of assimilate things like polysaccharides and peptides and all these things that help us with energy. Yeah, okay. Like these enterocytes, yeah, okay, which were one of the major sort of cells that line the mucosal lining in the small intestine. They actually play a major role in detoxification. About 25% of detoxification takes place in your digestive system. They also help with like antigen response, and they also allow when antigen response is taking place, the activation of T cells, so our immune system. Like you've heard me like talk about, like, we're sort of underestimating the importance of the gastrointestinal tract, and I just sort of say, well, the liver most of the time is copying it, because phase 1 liver detoxification and that first stage of detoxification is just not really happening very efficiently in the gut. And guess what? That sort of phase 3, where it's sort of getting finished off in the gut, that's also not functioning that well, because the gut lining has just been compromised so much. And as I said, there's so many of these different cells. You look at something like the goblet cells, where the goblet cells actually help with the production of mucin, yeah, okay, which means it's like a protective lining, okay, that actually, that's part of our immune system, okay? So you think about it, if I start deteriorating the structure of this lining, because the goblet cells are just sort of scattered throughout, most of the mucosal lining in the gastrointestinal tract and so forth, yeah, okay? But if I start compromising the structure of this gut lining, well, just think about how many complications are going to start to arise. Not just detoxification, but it's your immune system, it's your ability to assimilate micronutrients and macromolecules and all these types of, and guess what? Then that's also going to start to affect things like your hormones and your neurotransmitters. The analogy I like to use lately is it's a little bit like, imagine a waterfall, and imagine the top of the waterfall is the actual structure of food. So the particular molecular structure of food. Yeah. Okay. So this is one of the most important things, that the structure of food that we're putting in our body is as it should be, so that the body can deal with the particular bacteria in it. And we've got your microbiome is so complex and is responsible for so many biochemical reactions in the body, and the production of neurotransmitters and the production of hormones and all these types of things. Yeah. Okay. Imagine that top of the waterfall. So the structure of food is vital. Yeah. Okay. But then also when we put the food in, what area's got to assimilate this? And that's sort of like the middle section of the waterfall. Okay. Because for me, that's the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, because this is where assimilation takes place. Yeah. Okay. Yep. And once assimilation takes place and you're able to, break down the macromolecules into singular molecules, like things like amino acids and lipids and glucose molecules and so forth, which essentially they're fuel for the cells and your mitochondria. It's just like this perfect sort of synergy and in the human body. Yeah. Okay. Well, if assimilation is broken, then guess what? Further down the waterfall, things that are at the bottom of the waterfall, like protein compounds and hormones, because hormones are just you got peptide hormones, and you've got what we call steroidal hormones, which means they derive from proteins and lipids and fats. Yeah. Okay. Well, they're down the bottom of the waterfall. Yeah. Okay. And even things like your brain chemicals. Yeah. Okay. Like neurotransmitters and so forth, because they derive from things like proteins, amino acids, and also lipids as well. Yeah. Okay. So if we had some sort of problem with the waterfall, yeah. Okay. And I said to you, Amrit, I want you to find out what the problem is in the waterfall. Would you go to the base of the waterfall and then start hanging out there trying to find out where the problem was?
We could find a whole bunch of stuff that was, Yeah,
and so the thing is, like, if I want to find out why the waterfall's not flowing properly, I'm not going to go to the bottom. I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to find out, so the quality of what I'm putting in my body is not good. And also the area that's got to assimilate it is broken. Yeah. Okay. And as I said, all these different types of cells and things like Paneth cells, and they're really important for like our immune system and all these types of aspects. And when that structure is broken, it just becomes this huge cascade effect where the waterfall now all of a sudden doesn't flow very well. Yeah. Okay. So another big factor for us at Fifth Element is looking at gut health. Yeah. Okay. And nutrition. So what's the quality of the food like that you're actually putting into your body? Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing is stress management. Yeah. Okay. So that's a big one for us because the reality is, and I talk about this all the time, if I'm not managing my stress properly, yeah. Okay. And that might be, mechanisms such as meditation and restorative yoga, and even, unfortunately, just dealing with your emotions as well. Yeah. Okay. And trying to practice more positive emotions. Yeah. Okay. So more things like, care and compassion and appreciation and gratitude, because those four emotions sort of govern the heart to brain axis. Yeah. Okay. And also we know that more positive emotions like this, they actually help with the gut lining and they actually help with protective elements in the gut lining, like things like secretory IgA. I always mention that in most podcasts I do, because the secretory IgA it's an immunoglobulin. Yeah. Okay. So it's a particular molecule that is actually really abundant in saliva. So wherever you've got things like, snot and tears and mucus, where you got to understand you've got a huge amount of mucus that lines the gastrointestinal tract. and especially the small intestine. And the way to sort of explain secretory IgA is it's a little bit like the Venus flytrap. So it's sitting at the top of the mucosal cell, okay? And it's trapping in things like pathogens and bad bacteria and so forth. So you want to know it's basically your body's natural vaccination. That's your immunology. That's your body's, basically your body's vaccine. Okay. And so we know that mucosal lining and so forth gets deteriorated through negative emotions like fear and anger and, stress and, whatever that might be, those negative emotions, we actually know through science that actually starts to deteriorate your secretory IgA levels, okay? Which means your mucosal lining is deteriorating, okay? And then guess what? Is that going to affect assimilation? Of course it is, okay? Which means you're going to struggle. It just becomes like this huge cascade effect in the body where you're going to struggle to assimilate, particular micronutrients. So things like vitamin B6, okay? And then the irony is, because vitamin B6 is needed for so many metabolic and enzymatic process in the body, it's just ridiculous, yeah? And I need it to actually help with because it's a cofactor, I need it to help me with the production of things like glutathione. And glutathione is like the master antioxidant in the body, okay? That actually helps with phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification, but it also helps my ability to help to detoxify from particular germ spores and byproducts and all these types of things. So the thing is, and you don't assimilate these micronutrients properly. And then the irony is that I need things like B6 because B6 actually helps with the mucosal cell. It's one of the key ingredients that I need for the integrity of the mucosal cell. I'm sort of like playing devil's advocate here a little bit because, and that's why I'm so big. And I think I've spoken to you about this before. I'm like micronutrient therapy. Okay. Yeah. And I'll just use another example, like vitamin C. Yeah. Okay. So once again, without going too far down the rabbit hole, but I might. Yeah. Okay. But, a lot of people have got things like, problems with blood glucose management. They've got things like insulin resistance. And the whole thing is, if I've got elevated blood glucose levels, which I'm going to tell you most of the people I deal with, they do, then that means even though I might be eating good quality foods that have vitamin C, then vitamin C doesn't get uptaken in the cell properly because I've got elevated blood glucose levels. So sometimes it can be ridiculous, people taking these vitamin C tablets that have got high amounts of glucose and all these types of things. But then the thing is, vitamin C plays a role in so many, because it's a cofactor as well. Yeah, okay, plays a role in so many particular enzymatic processes and so forth. But once again, guess what? You need vitamin C because it actually helps with the repair and replenishment of collagen. And collagen is like your connective tissue, okay? But I also need vitamin C because it plays a major role in the synthesis of your white blood cells, okay? So, it actually helps with my immune system. But just think about it. If I'm not getting enough out of my nutrition and also I've got elevated blood glucose levels, yeah, then there's a fair point to say that my vitamin C stores and my vitamins, because vitamin C also helps with catecholamines. It actually helps with things like cortisol and, epinephrine, like adrenaline. So you actually need it to actually help with your stress hormones and so forth. So once again, let's play devil's advocate. And if I'm stressed out all the time and so forth, yeah, would it be fair to say that I'm putting a huge amount of pressure on my vitamin C stores? Now, guess what? Yeah, okay. That's going to come at a cost to things like collagen, connective tissue. Yeah, okay. That's going to come at a cost to things like my white blood cells because, I need people to understand the body is not like an accountant. So as I was sitting there and just going calculating and going, yeah,
10% here, 10% there.
Yeah, you get 5%. Don't go over. So if you go over, then you're not getting any more. Yeah, okay? Yeah. Or I'm going to give you 20%. Because you've got to understand in the moment in time, for me, there's 3 major responses in the body that they've just got to take priority. They've just got to take priority. Yeah. Okay. And if I look at it, and I talk to people about this all the time, one is stress response.
Yep.
Okay. And I always use this example. If I'm sitting here and I'd probably be eating something like a sardine salad. That might not tickle everyone's fancy, but for me, it's pretty good. Okay. Yep. But if I'm sitting here eating a sardine salad and some guy comes charging at me from across the road with a knife, what's more important, me sitting here digesting the sardine salad or dealing with the guy with the knife? Well, of course, that's stress response, because if I don't deal with that stress response, what could the end result be? The end result could be death, potentially.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So the body's going to speed up. It's almost like gastric dumping, where it just goes, well, we can eat again later. Okay, because as soon as that stress response happens in the brain, where you're producing more corticotropin releasing hormone, that particular stress hormone tells the digestive system, and in particular, it downregulates a hunger hormone called ghrelin.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And that means you're just not hungry anymore. And that's why when people go, well, I like to intuitive eat and all this sort of stuff, and I go, yeah, but understand intuitive eating comes when you've realigned a lot of things in the body, like your microbiome, like the mucosal cells and your gastrointestinal tract. Yeah, okay. And once you've done the work, then yeah, there's room to say that you can intuitive eat. But if you're under stress all the time and so forth, well, guess what? Your appetite is being artificially suppressed. Okay, and then that comes at a further cost, because if I down-regulate something like ghrelin, okay, well, ghrelin actually helps with the secretion of growth hormone. And so that's my ability to repair and recover. And you see, the only reason I bring up these things, Amrit, because people just need to understand cascade, because we just look at one thing and we just go, yeah, it just does that. Well, probably not. It probably does this. So as soon as we take that piece of the jigsaw puzzle out, well, guess what? The jigsaw puzzle is not complete.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So that stress response has to be prioritized in that moment in time. Yeah. Okay. Which means for me to respond to that stress response, is it going to take energy from the body to do that? And where's that energy going to come from? Well, it's going to come from key essential building blocks like amino acids, like micronutrients, yeah, okay? Because it's also going to come down to ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, okay? Which is what fuels your mitochondria, what fuels your, because we are energy, yeah, okay?
Cell reactions.
But that stress response means I'm going to need more nutrients, yeah, okay? And I'm going to deplete more things like magnesium and zinc. Zinc's really an important micro mineral that actually helps with things like the mitochondria, and actually helps with things like energy. Yeah, okay. But you're going to deplete it if I'm having that response all the time. Okay. And also you're going to deplete things like cholesterol. Okay. Because now I've got to produce more things like stress hormones and so forth. So we can respond to that stress response, but understand we have to take from the body to do that. Yeah. And then a little bit of my argument is we're sort of taking, but then we don't give back.
Yeah.
Okay. And then because the area
again and again as well.
And constantly. Yeah. Okay. And that's, I've spoken to you about this before, and like people love things like fasting and all this type of stuff. And I'm a big advocate of fasting because there's a huge amount of benefits for it, but it works in conjunction with food. Yeah. Okay. Because when we're actually giving our body the correct nourishment and so forth to actually help with, things like the mucosal cells and to help with the brain and all this sort of stuff. Okay. Then because we've got the reserves and the stores and all this type of stuff, that allows fasting to do its job now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They work in conjunction, but now you got people going, well, they're malnourished. They've got gastrointestinal issues, and they go, I'll just fast. Yeah. And I'm just like, just understand fasting is a stress on the body. So potentially you might just be taking more of the macromolecules and the micronutrients that your body actually requires because it's under a huge amount of stress.
Stressed out by.
Does that make sense? And then like you look at things like, so that's one factor. And the other factor that sort of goes along with that is like blood glucose management. Okay. Right. So because if I'm stressed, then I have to produce blood glucose, yeah, okay, which means I'm going to, actually ask the pancreas, yeah, okay, to produce things like glucagon to raise my blood glucose levels, because now I need energy to respond to the stress response. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. But also people need to understand that one of the, most important functions is that I also regulate my blood glucose levels. Yeah, okay. because if I don't regulate my blood glucose levels, what's going to happen? They're going to drop extremely low. You could potentially slip into a coma. And what could the end result be? Once again, it potentially might be death. Yeah. Okay. And understand, if I'm always putting this, because it's actually stress that actually puts some of the most negative response on blood glucose.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not even taking into account food. Yeah. Okay. Because after I do a training session, my blood glucose levels will probably drop 1 to 2 hours after doing a training session. Now, that's quite similar to me being stressed out, correct? Okay. Which means if I'm stressed out all the time, then there's a good chance that my blood glucose levels are probably going to drop roughly close to about 4 to 5 hours. Yeah. Right. Okay. And that's not even taking into account food, which means you're going to call on a process called gluconeogenesis, which is a metabolic pathway that we have developed over evolution to help us during periods of starvation. And that means you're going to call on cortisol. And guess what? That means it needs to take glycogenic amino acids, like things like glutamine and arginine. It's going to have to take from your nitrogen pools, your amino acid pools, to actually to elevate your blood glucose levels so that you can deal with the stress response. So that it's got to take to help that response happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So my question would be to people, but what are you doing to replenish that? Because otherwise the body's just going to constantly take. Does that make sense? So regulation of blood glucose is really important. And then the other one is like antibody response. So actually fighting off bacteria that may be attacking your cells. Now, why is that so important? Because potentially if we just allow, some of these opportunistic and secondary infections and so forth to attack your cells, well, the end result might be disease, correct? So you might get things like autoimmune diseases and cancer and so forth. But for me to respond to that antibody response means I'm going to go through things like cellular activation, which means I'm going to stimulate things like white blood cells. Okay. And then people just have this perception that it's okay, my body can just produce white blood cells forever. Yeah. Okay. Well, like everything has got to come from somewhere, correct? Yeah. Okay. And if you look at stem cells, which actually help with the production of red blood cells and white blood cells, what actually helps with the structure of stem cells was actually vitamin A. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And vitamin A, you know me, I'm big on things like organ meats and slow cooked meats. And I want to stress to people, I'm not big on lean meats. Okay. And the thing is, if you included a little bit like organ meats and slow cooked meats, guess what? You probably wouldn't have to eat a lot of meat. Yeah. Okay. Because, and a lot of people do have problems with that conversion of beta carotene to vitamin A. That's the problem. So if you're relying on getting all your vitamin A, which we need for the stem cells, which means we need it for things like lymphocytes and red blood cells and granulocytes, which is like neutrophils and all these types of, there's a building block. Yeah. Okay. Then, and you've got those conversion issues. Yeah, okay. Well, guess what? You might not be getting enough vitamin A because once again, your body's not just going to keep on producing these things without the building blocks.
It needs.
Yeah. Okay. And even things like your neutrophils and all these we need things like folate. Yeah. Okay. And guess what? Some people have problems because they've got methylation issues. They've got problems converting folate into its more bioavailable form, which is methylfolate. They've got genetic sort of mutations. Yeah. Okay. Which they, for me, probably only makes up about 15% of what's probably going to happen to you in your life. Yeah. Okay. But those can be factors, which means you're probably not getting enough of the building blocks you need for things like the neutrophils and the basophils and the eosinophils, which actually help sort of exhibit, which means identify, then engulf, and then excrete, get rid of the nasties. Yeah, okay? My point being, if I've got a lot of that antibody response taking place, then I'm taxing out my white blood cells. Would it be fair to say? Yeah, okay? Because they've got it, they're coming to your aid, correct? Yeah, okay? And then the other thing is then you've got to produce anti-inflammatory mediators in response to that. Yeah, okay. Which means you've got to produce things like histamine. Yeah, okay. You've got to produce things like prostaglandins. Prostaglandins, the major building blocks for that come from omega-3. Okay, so you've got things like PGE1, PGE2, PGE3. PGE3s come from EPA, which we get from omega-3. Yeah, okay. Especially things like high quality fish oil, but good quality seafood, wild caught fish, and all this type of stuff, and so the thing is, if I'm having these pro-inflammatory reactions in the body, which has been caused by this bacterial overgrowth and that, well, would it be fair to say I'm going to need more omega-3? And what happens, and it's not a case of, I'm not saying to people, you just got to load up on omega-3 and just keep on having these responses, but you're definitely going to need more omega-3 to help you during that process whilst you do what? Whilst you fix the problem. Does that make sense? I know when I've gone on a bit of a massive rant.
No. Okay? It's been perfect. It's been really good. The next question that sort of pops out, just kind of following in the groove of what you're saying, and thank you so much for sharing that, is this idea around hormesis, because I know already kind of what's going to pop out of this conversation a little bit, but I really want to have a chat to you about, there's good stress, but there's also bad stress on your body. And you've kind of been talking to that already in terms of taxing too much, but then also there is no movement versus some movement versus, Can we talk a little bit about hormesis?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're talking more about, because what I need the listeners to understand as well, and I mean, I've gone through this period myself, is where we've sort of demonized stress. Yeah, okay. So we demonize stress, and let's clear one thing up. Stress is not a bad thing. Stress is a good thing, and then you got people who are trying to avoid stress, saying I don't need any stress on the body and so forth. And if I say that we're a little bit like a seesaw, yeah, okay. I like to use that sort of analogy, yeah, okay. And so we should go through periods when we're eating more food, and when I say eating more food, I'm not talking you going and eating 2 large pizzas and a 6-pack of beers. Yeah. Okay. I'm talking about good nourishing food that nourishes your cells, nourishes your mitochondria, nourishes the gut, gives the building blocks, especially things like saturated for the brain, saturated fats for the brain, and all these types of things, the building blocks that we need to nourish the body. Okay. So you should go through periods where you almost eat to your base metabolic rate, or sometimes a little bit above that, to give the body the building blocks it needs for things like sex hormones and even your metabolism, like things like your thyroid. Okay. Because, I hate to break the news to people, but guess what? The building blocks for these things are derivatives from food. Yeah. Okay. It's just that simple. Okay. There's not a little fairy factory in your body that is producing these things. Yeah. Sometimes I've said to people, where do your hormones come from? And they just go, they come from your endocrine glands. And I go, that's just location. That's where they get excreted from. Okay. Where they come from is things like fats. They come from cholesterol. Yeah. Okay. And they come from peptides, things like insulin and thyroid. They're peptide hormones, which means they come from amino acids. You look at the thyroid, it comes from tyrosines, 2 tyrosine molecules, and iodine. And iodine gets extracted from the blood, but guess where the iodine comes from? Comes from our diet. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, the one thing is people need to sort of realize, yeah, okay, that, yeah, we need, with stress, yeah, okay, where we can be taking a lot from the body. Yeah. Okay. And so if I get back to that analogy of us being a little bit like a seesaw, so we go through periods of needing to eat more food, but I don't dispute we also need to go through periods where we eat less, because it helps with insulin sensitivity, it helps with detoxification, it can rest the digestive system. When you do things like fasting, and that helps with a particular gut hormone called motilin, and then motilin actually helps with gut motility, so it actually helps with the intestinal churning and so forth. And you need to go through that period of fasting, and there's many different ways you could do that. Okay, so once again, it's that seesaw of there's benefit from eating more and there's benefit from eating less. There's not just benefit from eating less. Yeah. Okay. And the same thing with stress. Yeah. Okay. There's benefit for us going through periods of stress when it's the right type of stress. Yeah. Okay. Things like cold therapy, heat therapy. Yeah. Okay. Things like training. Yeah. Okay. Because training is a stress on the body. And, once I cause cellular damage. Yeah. Okay. Then that means the body's got to, because this is a good inflammatory response in the body, which means now the body has to repair and recover and so forth. So, yeah, and that means we're sort of raising our homeostasis in the body as well, which means our ability to be more resilient and handle, like if that stress response is going to happen, then I'm in a better position to be able to deal with that stress response. Does that make sense? Because I've applied more stress to the body. And if you look at the sympathetic nervous system state, which a lot of people tend to be a little bit more, they have a lot more sympathetic nervous system hyperactivity. Which means they are taking a lot from the body and so forth. But there are good aspects to that. And when we're more in that sympathetic nervous system dominant state, then we elevate our heart rate, we increase perspiration. We increase things like blood pressure, and these are all good things so that we can actually deal with this. We can actually deal with the stress response, which is a survival mechanism. And then you've got the parasympathetic nervous system, which for me, the big factor there would be things like the vagus nerve, which is part of the enteric nervous system, which is the longest cranial nerve in the body, But the parasympathetic nervous system is more rest and digest. Now, if I had to say ratio-wise, of course, we should have a little bit more parasympathetic nervous system activity, because it's all about repair and recover, so that when we face that stress response again, once again, because you're rested and you've repaired the cells and you've repaired the damage that you've caused to your body. Once again, you're in a better position to deal with your stress resilience is better. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So the whole thing is, if we look at that sort of eustress, which is like your good stresses, and then your distress. But I also want people to understand is that sometimes good stresses, things like fasting and sometimes training, when you've got a lot of distress on the body, guess what? They could just be adding to your allostatic load, which means they're actually adding to your stress load. So that's why I always say to people, just understand when is the right time to use these particular mechanisms and so forth, because guess what? If you're not doing the right training to really what's going on in your body, and you start doing, high intensity interval training, well, guess what? They could actually be adding to your stress load.
And you're actually traumatizing your body in many ways.
Yeah, because you might have, gut dysbiosis, and you might have things like SIBO, which means you're already producing excessive amounts of hydrogen ions, and you're also potentially producing more lactic acid. Well, guess what? If I start doing that type of training where you're also producing more hydrogen ions and more lactic acid, and these people normally after a training session normally sort of pops up the next day, is they just feel like they've been hit by a Mack truck. But the thing is that actually training would be classified as a eustress, is actually a good stress. But in that instance, now it's actually a distress on the body. And same thing, if I'm malnourished and I'm not getting enough macromolecules and micronutrients because I'm already only having one meal a day and I'm highly stressed, and then I go, I'm going to fast, I'm going to do intermittent fasting, which, by the way, is actually really good for your secretory IgA levels and all that if you use it in the right way. But now you're already malnourished, and now you're applying fasting, which is a eustress, but it's going to apply distress to the body.
This was something massive that I walked out with on the back of our consultation as well when I came in with you a little while ago now. But it was an idea that's basically dropped in for me. And that was actually kind of the seed for this question, this idea around hormesis, because I've gone back to the gym after taking a couple of years off, and I was training all day, every day for like about 9 years. I'd spend hours in the gym every day, and just like absolutely, if it wasn't sore, I hadn't worked it out, and it was a real backwards way of being with my body. And now I'm going into the gym and only like committing to about 10-15 minutes of strength working out, but really like focusing on the fact that when I leave energized. I leave in a place where I don't feel destroyed. I feel like I went, I moved, I did something strong, and like definitely, there was a response. Definitely had, like perspiration, that sort of stuff, but I'm not committing to the absolute slogs, knowing that, it's about consistently coming back every other day and having the energy and having the body go through the process that it can withstand, and allowing it to be a good stress. And that kind of bleeds into my next question, which is working on that consistently, like having this is your seesaw that you were describing with good stress. The seesaw has a plane, and that plane kind of, is there an opportunity, and I kind of see it this way at the moment, and I'm really hoping to learn something here, is about longevity, your relationship with stress and sort of coming into a good balance with that, and how you can sort of plane that out a little bit further with consistently introducing tools to longevity in your life.
Yeah, I mean, look for me, I come up with a sort of terminology of you got to eat to your stress levels. The only reason I bring that up, because if I'm stressed out all the time, then there's a huge amount of evidence to say that I'm going to need more things like amino acids, more things like lipids, more micronutrients, and so if I don't want to do anything to mitigate that stress load, well, then guess what? I am going to continue to take from the body. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And the negative can be in that instance is that, the answer is not always just give the body more food to deal with the stress, and I just keep on upping my stress load, because now potentially, because I'm having to eat a lot of food, higher quantities, and because nutrient density is just not like it used to be. So there's a good argument to say that even if you eat good organic food, good quality food, that you're just not going to get a lot of the same micronutrients and macromolecules and all these types of stuff. So there's more evidence to say that because that's the case, that we probably need to eat a little bit more to get a lot of the things that we need out of food. So, by no means am I saying that the answer to help with stress load is for you just to constantly eat more food so that you can still be stressed out all the time, but you can handle it better because you're getting a lot of the nutrients that you require. I think short term, just to stop a leaky boat, that can definitely help. Yeah, okay.
Then you're dumping on your digestion system a lot as well.
Yeah, but you are putting a lot of pressure on your gastrointestinal tract. Some instances, people to get body composition results and that they might be consuming, 500 grams of sweet potato or something like that, and you need to understand is that that's a huge amount of fermentation taking place in the digestive system. Yeah, okay. And it can really stress out the digestive system. You know what I mean? So, if we, I'm big on longevity, and I'm fascinated with a lot of the blue zone areas and so forth. And I think I might have told you, Amrit, but last year we actually did our first retreat to a blue zone area, and we actually went to Sardinia, and where they've actually got some of the highest, longevity statistics in the world now.
They've got centurions living there.
Yeah, especially for men. So their actual longevity through men is amazing. I think it's more to do with the balance of their androgen hormones, especially things like their DHEA levels and their testosterone, and next year we're going to actually do a tour to Okinawa, where they've actually got the highest percentage of, I think it's 80% of the elderly live independently in Okinawa. Yeah, okay. And, a lot of people are trying to find that formula. And, I've heard people talk about, that they consume a lot more vegetable matter. And, you look at somewhere like Okinawa, they actually, I think they consume a little bit more soy than mainland Japan. Yeah, okay. But once again, I would say that comes down to a lot to do with quality. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But they also consume a lot more yellow and green vegetables than sort of like mainland Japan. Yeah, okay. So, we can look at their nutrition. Yeah, okay. But then guess what? They actually do eat animal matter as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. So actually in Okinawa, they consume a lot of shellfish. So they consume a lot of things like crustaceans like crab and prawns and sort of crayfish. And these have a lot because of the pink color of their shells and so forth. They've got a very powerful antioxidant in them called astaxanthin, which you actually get from like pink algae and so forth. Yeah. Okay. So, and at some point for me in our evolution, for us to sit there and like try and consume a truckload of like pink algae is quite hard on the digestive system. So we just thought, well, actually they're assimilating and they're dealing with the algae. We'll just eat them to get that nourishment. Yeah, okay. Because things like, powerful antioxidants like astaxanthin are actually, I can't remember the stats exactly, but more powerful than things like vitamin C, like more powerful than things like coenzyme Q10. Yeah, okay. So, super powerful antioxidants, and they actually do also consume a little bit more like pork as well. Yeah, okay. Especially considering the blue zone areas more up in the mountain part of like Okinawa. Okay. So they're consuming more pork where they actually get a lot of thiamine, like a lot of B1. Okay. That actually helps with things like estrogen clearance, but helps with aspects of the brain as well. So the point being is that I don't like really to sit there and look at their food. Yeah. Okay. Because you know what? In Sardinia, I'll start talking and guess what? They eat things like wheat every day. Okay. And that, my thoughts on wheat. Yeah. Okay. Because the quality of the wheat that we're consuming here has really high concentrations of gluten, like higher than the tritium durum wheat that they're actually consuming in places like Sardinia. The wheat is refined here. Yeah, okay. Then it's also got things like weed killer, like Roundup. Yeah, okay. And there's about 5 different responses that you can actually have to the wheat fractions in wheat. 5 different responses, and guess what? 3 of those responses aren't digestive. One of them is autoimmune, okay, which is actually to do with a thing called gliadin transglutaminase complex, yeah, okay, and that's actually where you get like autoimmune responses and so forth. So maybe that might be things like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease and all these types of things. Then another one is transglutaminase 3, which actually affects the brain. So people get things like headaches and migraines, and also affects the placenta. Yeah, okay. And then you've got transglutaminase 6, which actually affects the central nervous system. So these people might, and the brain as well. So these people get more agitated on edge. So, but people are just focusing on those digestive problems like gluten and so forth, where you get bloating and all that. But understand there's sort of only like 2 sort of responses where you get those sort of gastrointestinal responses, and actually the other 3 are more related to the brain. Do you know what I mean? So that's a complex beast. But in Sardinia, they're having sourdough that has a higher concentration of things like lactobacillus. Guess what? 93% of all Sardinians consume dairy every single day, which flies in the face of what they say about dairy. Okay, because for me, it's not to do with the demonization of food needs to stop. People sitting there and saying meat is bad for you needs to stop. Meat is good for you if it comes from the right sources. If you change its molecular structure, guess what? It's not good for you. But if you eat fruit, which has been sprayed with, insecticide and pesticide and so forth, guess what? The fruit, you're changing the fruit's immune system, because the fruit perceives it doesn't have to produce the phytonutrients, like resveratrol and anthocyanins and all these types of things, okay, because they're part of the fruit's immune system, because it doesn't need them, okay? And then the person's eating this fruit going, I'm getting all these amazing phytonutrients, and I'm just saying, well, most likely not, okay? Yeah. And then we're demonizing meat, but I'm just saying, don't demonize food. It's actually the processes that we're going through. Yeah, and in these blue zone areas, guess what? They don't have those. But like we're focusing on real anomalies, going, oh, they eat more eggplant, or they eat, like, I'm just going, like, don't focus on that stuff.
Their eggplant is not your eggplant. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like the quality of their food. They eat some animal proteins, but the quality of the animal protein they eat is way better. And guess what? Because they've got strong community bonds. Yeah.
So that means they're producing a lot. The next part of the conversation with you, actually. I just wanted to just wanted to quickly
Sorry, I went on a bit of a
No, you're perfect. That's perfect segue. I just wanted to anchor this in for the listeners as well. What you're just sharing about the food as well is something I had a direct experience of in Estonia. So they're completely wild they've got forest for, I think it's 80% of the country is just pure forest. There's bears and wild berries. They had these blueberries, right? And they're tiny. They're like the size of the little bits of the blackberries. And I'm eating these. I ate them one day, right? Maybe at about 200 grams of them. I couldn't get the pigmentation, the color out of my hand for 5 days afterwards. Yeah. And so that was like the conversation you and I had about, there's organic, but then there's like wild. And it was like, yeah, right. So I totally understood what like wild food is. And like thinking about the blueberries that I've been eating, I've never had any stains in my hand. Like there's that richness, that depth of the food, and like the pigments and everything that's in there is just missing.
And even Amrit, with things like, dairy, and I, like, as I said, I'm trying to defend food here, because we've got to a point where we're so confused, we're scared of food, and we say things like dairy. Oh, dairy is really bad. Well, how come in Sardinia, where they're consuming a lot of goats products and sheep's products, they've got such amazing longevity? Because there's things like glucosylingolipids, there's immunoglobulins, there's building blocks that we actually, like Walson factor that you get out of butter, that actually helps to drive calcium into your bones, so it actually helps with bone density. So there's all these amazing compounds that we actually, vitamin K. Vitamin K is crazy high in good quality dairy, And guess what? That could actually be a reason that a lot of people have got problems with things like vitamin D and bone density, and it's because they don't get enough of the other building blocks like vitamin A and vitamin K. It's not as simple as you just ramping up your vitamin D supplementation, because before you do that, you better make sure you've got enough vitamin A and vitamin K, So there's all these amazing compounds out of raw butter, raw milk, raw cream, But as soon as I have pasteurized, well, guess what, Because dairy has things like lactose, it's got glucose molecules and so forth. So as soon as it's pasteurized, it doesn't contain what? It doesn't contain lactase. So when I consume it, guess what it's going to do in my gut? That's like cement in your gut, which means it's going to sit there and ferment. And what types of issues is it going to encourage? Things like SIBO, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Somewhere where you were going in the conversation before was talking about community bonds, and that's really what I wanted to talk about as well, in terms of these places where, we talk about longevity as well. I really value that. Like you were talking about how they have like family ties, communities and stuff like that, also around their culture around food, but also their family, their social dynamics, and how does that play into longevity in some of these parts?
Yeah, well, we know, I always like to go into the biochemical aspect. But
absolutely.
If we look at the biochemical reactions that might happen when you consume food, don't worry, listeners, I'm not going to go into every single reaction that takes place. But let's let's just say there is biochemical reactions that take place when I eat food that nourishes the mucosal cells in my gut and all these types of things. So there's these biochemical reactions that take place. Or when I do an ice bath, there's a biochemical reaction that takes place, So when I expose myself to extreme heat or extreme cold, there's these biochemical reactions that take place. And just as if I diaphragmatic breathe, there's a biochemical reaction that takes place. The one thing that I know for sure, is if you do these things in community environments, and community bonds, that the biochemical response is greater. Like that.
Do you hear that?
It's just, it's for sure. We know community is one of the strongest aspects for things like brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which actually helps with repairing the synapses. I think on the last podcast I mentioned it briefly, helping with the formation of new like brain cells, and people talk about BDNF when it comes to fasting, and there's other aspects that help with BDNF as well, but for me, community actually has one of the biggest responses when it actually comes to this particular protein molecule, and if I'm in these community bonds, well, guess what? I'm probably hugging people more often, which means I'm gonna, trust me, Amrit, back in the day, I wouldn't have been a hugger. Yeah, okay?
But you had to do it for your health.
but yeah, exactly. Okay. But the whole thing is, and like at Fifth Element, when we do things like breathing sessions and cold therapy, we definitely get people to hug a stranger. Okay. Because now you release more oxytocin. Yeah. Okay. The one thing I'd say that can sort of compete from that perspective is actually just doing meditation, because we know meditation, especially like metacognition, and that can actually really ramp up your oxytocin release. Yeah, okay. And then oxytocin is just an anti-stress compound. Well, actually look at it. When females are in labor, yeah, okay, they actually produce more oxytocin. Now, why? To actually help with the labor, so it eases the labor. Yeah, okay. And the only thing that can impede on oxytocin is when you ramp up your catecholamines, like your stress hormones again. Okay, because the stress hormones will impede on the oxytocin. So I could say the same thing about me being in that community bond, okay, where I'm hugging people and then someone comes in and just ruins the whole atmosphere, yeah, okay? Okay, because now I'm going to produce more stress hormones, and that's going to counteract a little bit of the oxytocin release and so forth. But also you produce particular things like interferon nuclear factor, which is actually like I'm laughing more.
Exactly.
Okay, which
is sort of spend a lot. I was waiting for this.
Yeah, okay, because you laugh more, and so once again, it comes down to now I'm producing. Now I'm more of these positive emotions. Yeah, okay, which means now, guess what? I'm also going to help with. Well, I'm actually going to help with the gut lining as well, aren't I? Okay, because now I'm helping with that secretory IgA. In turn, I'm helping with my immune system. But guess what? In turn, I'm not taking as much nutrients from the body. Yeah, okay, because we know when I'm more stressed, the body wants more nutrients. Like we just know that. Yeah, okay. The two biggest factors for actually nutrient depletion. Okay, because we always go energy in, energy out. That's one factor. Yeah, having maybe a higher lean muscle mass means you might need a little bit more fuel for the muscle, for the cells in the muscle, and so forth. Okay, but the factor we don't take into account is stress. Okay, the other factor we don't take into account is the brain. Okay, because the brain is greedy. Okay, so the more stressed out I am, guess what? Probably going to need more nutrients to actually sustain the brain. Yeah, okay. But also, if I'm studying a lot and researching and so forth, like, would it be fair to say that the brain is, they say, what's the stat? Like 750 calories the brain will demand in a moderately stressful day. 750 calories is actually close to 2 meals for most people. Yeah, okay. So, if I'm in those strong community bonds, I'm producing a lot of these anti-stress compounds, like even more things like acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is excitatory in the brain, which means it actually helps with, short-term to long-term memory and all these types of things. But it's inhibitory in the cardiovascular system, which guess what means it actually helps to ramp down things like my blood pressure and my heart rate and all these types of things. Yeah, okay. So better for the cardiovascular system, and also it actually also helps with things like muscle contraction as well. But guess what? Acetylcholine is the gateway to the parasympathetic nervous system, okay? Because it actually helps with the vagus nerves, okay? So it actually helps with rest and digest, yeah, okay? And then there's other things that you produce. You produce more anti-stress compounds like vasopressin, yeah, okay? And vasopressin is an antidiuretic hormone. I was speaking to someone about this the other day. Vasopressin, you're going to produce more when you're drinking truckloads of alcohol, okay? Because it's an antidiuretic hormone. But guess what? Vasopressin actually helps with mental clarity in the brain, okay? So if I'm drinking alcohol all the time, well, guess what? That's impeding on me having this good clarity in the brain and functioning better. I'm not telling people never to drink alcohol, but I'm just saying if you're doing that on a regular basis, it's probably going to affect how you handle stress and the mental clarity in the brain as well, and things like prolactin, okay? And prolactin is another, if you look up Wikipedia, it's just going to say that it actually helps with lactation and milk production and all that. But guess what? Prolactin actually helps with balancing out electrolytes in the brain. Okay, things like chloride and sodium and all these types of things. Okay, so it actually helps. Once again, it actually helps with brain function. Yeah, okay, we know a lot of people can have problems with prolactin, especially when they're maybe going through high stress periods and so forth. Because if my prolactin levels are, ramped up and through the roof, then that could actually be a sign that I've burnt out my dopamine receptors. Yeah, okay. So like being in these strong community bonds means I'm producing a lot more of these sort of anti-stress compounds and so forth, like for sure, because they also have a sense of purpose as well.
Yo.
Yeah, okay. Like they have a sense of purpose. Yeah. Okay. Now for us, that might be simple. Okay. But a lot of them, especially in Sardinia, they're working the land until they're about 80 years old. That's purpose. Okay. A lot of the time when we get old, and we retire, guess what? Now we've lost our identity. We've lost our purpose. Would it be fair to say that's going to affect your biochemistry? Of course it is. Yeah. Okay. Because you don't know where you don't know where you stand anymore. And then when people get really old, then we put them in nursing homes where unfortunately they're surrounded by who? They're surrounded by other elderly people. Now, I'm not saying that in a bad way. Okay. Yeah. They're passing away as well. Okay. It really, these types of things have really made me think, because we're taking away from elderly people doing really what I think is like their major purpose, which is to pass on their experience.
Wisdom. Passed on the wisdom.
And their wisdom to the young people, which guess what? Sometimes parents don't have the capability to do that all the time. I mean, my experience with my grandparents was amazing. Like I can't imagine my childhood without my grandparents. Okay. Because they were a vital ingredient to shaping me as a person today. Okay. And I remember, like, I spent so much of my childhood with my grandparents, and as modern society evolves, that's becoming less and less and less.
Yeah.
Okay. And then guess what? In places like Okinawa and Sardinia and so forth, that's not the case.
Super strong.
Because they've got greater purpose, and also they've got greater self-care because they put good things in their body. And guess what? What parents don't want to do when they're probably bringing up kids is look after more kids. Okay. So if we've got people who aren't looking after their body and they've got all these health conditions, they've got gastrointestinal issues, they need to take medications all the time, they can't feed themselves. Well, it's hard for someone to look after them, but also, and that's what's forcing us to drive that wedge between those strong community bonds, because
that's profound.
Do you understand what I mean? So because people need to have a greater self-care. So when they get to 80, 90, guess what? They're independent. And they're capable of passing on the knowledge and so forth. I think it goes both ways for me, Amrit. Okay, that's one thing that I definitely saw in Sardinia. One thing I know from a lot of research on Okinawa, okay, is that basically they're living independently, okay, especially in Okinawa, okay, which means people don't have to look after them. They don't have to feed them and all these types of things, which means they're there and they're looking after themselves, but they're part of the community. They're passing on the knowledge. They're interacting a lot of the time with the youth, which keeps them younger. Do you know what I mean? Like there's nothing more to make you feel young than being surrounded by young people.
Yeah, there's I've been doing a lot of work on mindset recently, and just watching, like, in your environment, if you have a poster of an elderly couple or an elderly person on your wall, you actually get out of your chair slower and you move around your space slower. If you've got a poster of Michael Jordan on the wall, you actively move faster in your space. Science is in.
That's fascinating. Hey,
it's just how your brain is responding to the environment you're in. Man, I could shoot this with you all day, every day, and I just want to keep going. Just scratch the surface. This will have to be another podcast because I'm very conscious of your time. There is something that I wanted to sort of touch on just before we leave some. And I know this is kind of going to be an interesting one, especially because we don't believe in monotherapy. And I know each individual coming to see you is got its own, bag of tricks going on in there. And I think this is just a space I really want to, I guess, take the opportunity to advocate the work that you do. I went and saw David myself, and it was about an hour and a half, even though I only paid for the hour. And this is a testament.
I'm too passionate about this stuff. So I love it too much.
And he sort of just went all the way in and explained all the responses that I was having. And we basically did a blood test and a stool test and all this other stuff that came through. Now, he did the same thing with my partner, and I went and sat in on her consultation as well with her blessings. And she had a completely different bag of tricks going on with her. And as you can see, like just the amount of knowledge that David has just rattling around in his head, for me, and I just want to share this with you on air while I have the opportunity, is, physically, mate, like you're fit, you're solid, and I respect what you've done in that space. But just sitting there in a consult with you and then watching my girlfriend go through a consult, and just the amount of information in your brain that is readily available to you to speak to the different processes. Obviously, it is your passion, but making yourself physically and mentally available to that, and just how well the alchemy of all that dances in the space when you're receiving the information from you, mate, that to me is like, that's what inspires me to come and see you and is a real testament to your work. And I really want to share that with people because, coming along to have a consultation is
means a lot.
Man, it's incredible. But on that note, I wanted to sort of take away, because we had some really clear conversations about the fact that our soils are stripped of magnesiums and zinc. There are certain things that, just aren't available to us. Is there something that the listeners can sort of take away? Like, getting a good quality source of magnesium in their diet would definitely be helpful. Zinc definitely energizes. Obviously, there's a balance. I know like each person is individual, and that's why I prefaced it with them coming to see you to a big degree.
I mean, like it is a really hard question, because a lot of the time, like, people want to know, like, what's the magic pill, what's the magic formula, okay? And me, like, I just don't.
Absolutely.
Everyone's different. We assimilate food differently. Okay, we've got different ancestral background. Okay, that means that our ability to metabolize certain things, even things like lactose and so forth, can range from anywhere from 1 to 95%, depending on your gut environment and your ancestry and all this. So there's all these different factors. Okay, and we have different stress resilience, and that might be based on what's going on in our digestive system, and to do with sometimes even like white blood cells, and if we're producing too many basophils, that might affect our stress resilience and all these types of things. Okay, so the fact of the matter is, we are different. But the one thing I would say, is that you really want to give your body the building blocks that it need. Like I like to go for things that are multifaceted. So I talked about vitamin C. Well, if I get a vitamin C that the body recognizes a lot better, like a natural vitamin C, like a Kakadu plum, and supplements do serve a purpose in this day and age, because, like we've talked about, food quality is diminished and all these types of things. I'm not saying that people need to over supplement, but they do serve a purpose. But if I'm giving my body the micronutrients and the macromolecules that it requires, this is going to go a long way into helping many different functions within the body. My brain, my gastrointestinal health, my immune system, my joints, my bone density, tendons, ligaments, because you just want to make sure you're giving your body enough of the building blocks. So it might be vitamin A, so things like cod liver oil, but getting out your food, like things like organ meats, like liver, slow cooked meats, good quality vitamin C foods, like things like guava. And the one thing I'd stress also, Amrit, is people don't rotate their foods enough. That
was what was coming up in my head.
You've heard me talk about that.
You said this, and I didn't realize I eat 8 to 10 of the same sort of meals all the time.
And that means you're exposing your body to the same protein molecules and the same fiber molecules, and you want a shortcut to actually get digestive issues. Just eat the same foods over and over again. Because it's just causing like an antibody response. Like, especially like people just eat eggs every single day. They might eat 4 eggs every day. They're a high IgA food, which means you're going to build up an intolerance to them. And guess what? That's going to cause an antibody response, and that's going to cause things like cellular activation and your body to produce anti-inflammatory mediators, which means, once again, you're sort of taking from the body. Your food sensitivities change every 3 to 4 months. So, and that's really based on us having greater food rotation. So I'd encourage people to think outside the box, explore, have foods that you wouldn't normally have. It's not a case of vitamin C is only found in oranges. Like, have things like, like taro root, get away from eating things like sweet potato all the time. Like, I encourage people to have more diversity with their food. And once again, like just, even getting things more like B vitamins. Yeah. Okay. And that might once again come out of things like organ meats, but, good green leafy vegetables, things like okra is very high in folate. Yeah. Okay. And once again, you're sort of getting away from just eating broccoli and cauliflower all the time. Yeah. Okay. Because there's these foods that, are so nutrient dense that we're just not, I was speaking to someone about like even we should start to eat a lot more foods that naturally grew in Australia as well. Yeah. Okay. Because I'm a big advocate of that sort of stuff because, unfortunately we're having to use more water to sustain foods that actually were not actually meant to grow in the soil that Australia has to provide, which is not massively nutrient dense to start off with. Yeah. Okay. So we're having to add a lot of these nutrients into the soil and actually cultivate foods that weren't really meant to grow there. Yeah. Okay. So, I encourage people to get these building blocks.
Wicked.
That we know. I'm sorry I don't have like a direct formula.
I think that is the formula. I think that's perfect, brother. I think the mission is for those listening in over the next week, find 3 new meals to consume. Boom. Mix it up. Mix up your diet, find a great source and maybe three new meals that you've never had before. And if you can, like you said, throw in something different that you're not.
And throw in something like organ meats. I know like people are going to, people are going to screw up their nose but that's social conditioning, Amrit.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's social conditioning. Yeah. Okay. Like people just go, oh, that's not right. But guess what? Back in the day, they're like, the Aboriginals, when they killed something like a kangaroo, the first things that they would go for would be the internal organs. Okay. What part of the kangaroo would they eat when it comes to sort of like the meat, and that would be the tail. Why? Because it's got a higher amount of fat there. Yeah, okay, yeah. But they wouldn't be eating like the drumstick, yeah, okay, where it's the lean bit, okay. They went to things that had the highest nutrient density, okay, because you look at even things like brain, people are going to screw up their nose on that, but brain is very high in DHA. It's a key essential omega-3, yeah, okay, that you even need for things like your eyes, but you need for brain health, and even things like phosphatidylserine, which helps your ability to handle stress. Okay, and if we ate more of these things, guess what? We probably wouldn't be asking so much when it comes to animal proteins and so forth to sustain us during periods of extreme stress and all that. Because the one thing I'd like listeners to understand is we're more the hunter than ever before.
Yep.
We're more the hunter than ever before. Now, would it be fair to say if we're hunting all the time that we need more energy, we need more nutrients?
Calories, yeah.
Okay, like that, and that means we need more calories, which means we're putting more pressure on that, and the nutrient density isn't very great. Okay, that's another problem. And guess what? We're having to eat, huge amounts of food to give us the energy to deal with the stress and deal with that hunter mentality, okay, which might be putting a lot of pressure on the gastrointestinal tract with that. Yeah.
Perfect.
But, putting in place things to mitigate the stress response is vital as well, like things like metacognition, okay, which means you're producing more gamma waves. That's going to help with the pineal gland, inhibit a thing called monoamine oxidase, which means we produce more things like melatonin, produce more things like dimethyltryptamine, which helps with the subconscious and all that sort of stuff. Restorative yoga, okay, even cold therapy, because cold therapy does actually help with mitochondrial density, okay, and cold therapy, even helps with aspects of the brain like norepinephrine, so it actually helps with focus and concentration. And guess what? Cold therapy reduces the inflammatory load in the body as well.
Big way.
So it brings down pro-inflammatory activity, which means the body perceives it doesn't need to produce anti-inflammatory mediators in response to that, which means it just brings down inflammatory load. Now, if I bring down inflammatory load, guess what? I'm not asking as much of the body
to do a
anymore.
whole bunch of other things that you should be doing.
Exactly. And I'm not taxing the body with all these anti-inflammatory mediators and so forth. I'm not putting so much stress on omega-3 and all these types of things. So, you start putting some of these stress management procedures in place, and And guess what? That means when you put the nutrients in and so forth, then you're utilizing it more efficiently and you're getting the most out of it. Yeah.
Amazing. So that's going to go in the pro forma to all the corporate companies that I now coach meditation to.
Yeah.
Always, man.
Yeah. Like those types of things, like when it comes to enteric nervous system, which is communication between the gut and the brain and the vagus nerve, there's meditation, there's yoga, like restorative yoga. Okay. There's cold therapy, and even diaphragmatic breathing. Yeah, they're like the big four that actually help with both those aspects, which, as I said, that's to do with things like parasympathetic nervous system and autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, amazing.
I can tell you a whole heap of micronutrients like B vitamins, and I could do that, but without me seeing every single person, that's hard. Like, people can implement those big four things straight away.
Done.
Yeah.
Man, I want to really, really, really thank you again for taking the time out and cutting the energy and being here today and really sharing so effortlessly, and just so much energy that goes into just, I really want to thank you for being here today, and like in a big way also, not just for today, just like all the energy that goes into doing all the research behind the scenes. I know how much of your heart and your soul you pour into like researching bloods, researching stool, which, isn't necessarily the most flattering thing to be doing with your time. But
I love it though.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just really grateful that you exist. Yeah, man, just really, really grateful for everything that you do. And just as always, wishing you all the best for the upcoming years, solid start to 2019 that you've already had, and wishing you all the best for everything that's coming up this year, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, it's an absolute pleasure being on the podcast again. And, thank you for spreading the word. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it wasn't for people like you, we wouldn't be getting out the message to the masses. Do you know what I mean? And I know, like, you do really amazing work in teaching people about, more positive emotions and tapping into, that headspace and things like meditation. So just keep on doing what you're doing as well. If there's more and more people doing this stuff, then the ripple effect is just going to be pretty phenomenal. Yeah. I've actually, I think I might have told you last year, I actually went away in July. I actually wrote a book, and it's actually got a lot of these aspects, that there is no such thing as a monotherapy, and you need to look at all these different aspects, because I've seen it too many times, and I've seen the people that adopt multiple things like cold therapy, heat therapy. They fix their gut, they look at their emotions, they meditate, and these are the people that just feel amazing and they're just getting the most out of their life. Yeah.
Absolutely. And for those wanting to tune in with David, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the best place is the Fifth Element Wellness website.
Yep.
It's an amazing resource unto itself. But then obviously, you can tune in and book a consult and find out more about what's going on there. And yeah, like almost giving you the hug of death here, but Dave is accessible. So you can just shoot him an email, and he usually is pretty onto it with his responses as well.
Yeah. Not all the time, but I try. I try.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me, Amrit.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Love of the Inspired Evolution and sharing the Love of the Inspired Evolution. If you feel like this content has supported you or may support anyone else that you know may resonate with the content of it, please share away and share the love around. Thank you guys so much. And to stay up to date on whatever's coming out with the Inspired Evolution, please subscribe. There's all these links in the bio for you to tune into the episodes and all these different platforms, just so the message can get to you and your loved ones. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Stay inspired to evolve.